We're smooth 98.1 FM has gone 29 minutes already before it is top of the hour, 8 o'clock. But before we get to the top of the hour, 8, it means we've got the papers standing in between you and that hour. So let's get the papers out of the way. It's called Freshly Pressed. My name is Omatseye Atsenuwa. If you're ready, let's get into meet the men who are the Friday men. So let's get into it and say big good morning to AB Bozimo this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Omatseye. Good morning to Joseph, and good morning to all of the wonderful listeners from everywhere.
Top of the morning to Joseph Obari.
Thanks, Omas, and all our listeners. A big good morning, everybody.
Now the analysts are set, so let's get to make you also know that Freshly Pressed, the analyst would have their say, the listener would have their say about the headlines, and then the middle will have the facts drop in there. So look at the middle in all of this. That's how it works here. Let's get your reactions to the headlines and how you react to them onto the phone line. 0809-444-0981 is where I look forward to reading those messages. With that said, let's pick up our face paper. That's the Tribune newspaper, and we'll go over now to Joseph to help us understand this headline. President Tinubu donates 20 million naira grants to persons living with disabilities, as well as scholarships included. So what does this would say about inclusion does this now make up for inclusion for these categories of persons in the government?
Well, I don't know, maybe this money was donated in his personal capacity, or it was money given to this group of people by the president of Nigeria, or in what manner. And then these are the kind of things. Sometimes you read news and then there are questions that are not answered, but maybe because of the journalistic skills of the people writing the story itself. But the point is this: what is needed is something more holistic and national for this category of people who badly need support. And so 20 million naira grant sounds tokenish. It's like you're just, I mean, how does that really solve any problem for people with disabilities? Some of the needs they have requires quite a lot of money. I mean, some of them need equipment, some of them need to undergo special operations and things like that, and buy what the aids they need to be able to function properly. So 20 million to the association, to group, or whatever individuals. So there should be a national program that addresses the needs of people living with disability, such that the taste is more holistic and it lifts them out of that situation in which they find themselves. It should be something broad. It should relate to even how they access public buildings and all those kind of things, how they get healthcare, all that. Something very comprehensive is needed. And I think that, it's good, well-intentioned to give some money to them, but I don't think it really addresses the major issues that confront people living with disability. So we should cease doing tokenish actions and address issues very, very, very pragmatically from a holistic point of view. And that's what I can say. 150 POS machines, giving some of 100,000 each to operate capital finish. Good for individuals, whatever. But how many of them can get this, and how does it really solve the problem that they face?
Maybe I know you have something to add to this.
Very quickly, you see, as Joseph has correctly said, it's well-intentioned. However, 20 million versus actually how many people are living with disabilities. And disabilities, they are physical, they are mental, and others. But lastly, the former president actually was able to advocate for and pass a law that insisted that there should be access provided for people with disabilities into public buildings. That's the level at which a president can have a more lasting effect on the society as a whole. There are barriers. Dropping the barriers to people participating in every physical environment is a major thing. So 20 million great. As we said, individuals who get it, what's the basis? How do they get it? I think everything should be done to make sure that laws are passed at the federal and state level to ensure that every public building is made accessible to people with disabilities. That will aid them in participating more in a more dignified manner in ordinary activities of life.
And that leaves us to go over the Punch newspaper, where the headline there is speaking about Nigeria needs total restructuring. And this move and the statement is coming accredited to the governor of Oyo State, Seyi Makinde. For how long have we gone about this chorus of restructuring? For how long would we hear all of this in public forums, this speechifying the people and then getting to see it truly in practice?
Indeed, when I saw the story, I am an advocate for full fiscal restructuring. So yes, it does tug at my heartstrings. However, this word restructuring means many different things to many different people. For some people, rather than seeing it as a gain, they see it as a loss. For others, there is an opportunity for everybody to come into their own and for all to strive and thrive together. When we talk about restructuring, what do we actually mean? In my view, it should be full fiscal federal restructuring, where every state now has a motive to promote its internally generated revenue and pays a portion to the center. The way it is right now, some states can be perceived, and I use that word very carefully and specifically, as air quotes lazy, because they sit down literally on their thumbs for 28 to 31 days and crawl to the federal capital, get allocated, spoon-fed a sum of money called federal allocation, then wriggle their way back to their states and distribute it in a pointless manner as far as I can tell. That is the current state of affairs. If every state depends, let me give you an example of restructuring. Let every state governor and every state legislature be paid a percentage or portion of what they legitimately generate internally. You will find that all those Jeeps, I mean, think of the 20 million for all the PWDs who got it. You cannot even buy one Jeep that we just heard about recently. So if every legislator who was just allocated a Jeep because he has a Babariga would actually have to earn money based on what he can use his intellect to generate in his state, you will find this country is thriving, moving forward on all cylinders, because there'll be no more quote unquote free money. Every state in this country has so much it can do, but right now, as currently constituted, i.e., based on the constitution of the country, you can sit back, be perceived as lazy, and still get all the benefits. So that's the structuring I would support. And of course, there are many other ideas. We can all put it together.
From your submission, one could extract the fact that some class of persons are afraid of the restructuring, and then some region seem also to be afraid of restructuring. So how long can we keep postponing and one region carrying the weight of the rest of the country?
It is the question. So you hear this from the governor. It's well intended. I know that this is a short piece of whatever I must have said. I would have loved to understand what type of restructuring he might have been targeting in his speech. And I'm sure I can find the whole story later on.
Now, unfortunately, just to chip in, unfortunately, this country, we all came together. There was a national conference that was convened under Goodluck Jonathan, where for the first time, at least we pretended to have come together. We discussed almost every issue that arises around these issues of restructuring. And some very landmark decisions were made and they were documented. And then the next thing was the political elite of this country have been our bane ever since independence. It's a political elite. They are the ones who are creating all the confusion. It is all because of their selfish interests. I personally feel that even the so-called national heroes contributed to some of the problems we've had today. And the foundation of this country has never really been sound. and it's those fault lines are what are just magnifying themselves ever since. And the early political elites exploit these fractures to their advantage. So now we are unable to extricate ourselves from our primordial sentiments and so on. And we are not just in one pot boiling. I don't know. It's unfortunate,
Before we let this issue of restructuring as raised by Seyi Makinde, the governor for your state, rest, I would throw this quick question quickly over to AB. AB, they say the taste of the pudding is in in eating it. So let's cast our mind back. We've had a taste of what a pseudo federalism should look like back in the days. And from the tales we had, it shows that the massive progress that was recorded still stand as a pointer that's where we should go to through restructuring of the federation.
Well, as Joseph has said, and as you are alluding to, a lot of the people right now, when the purpose of being in office and in a lawmaking body is misunderstood, then it's abused easily. People state on record that because roads are bad, they justify getting foreign vehicles, SUVs, rather than addressing the bad roads so that everybody can drive normally. You see, when you have that mentality about what's good for me alone, with my Baba Riga, my furniture allowance, and my newspaper allowance, and other allowances, then you find that set of people will resist what are, in my views, fairly logical steps that can progress us all.
Now, Joseph, please, we need you to help us understand our next paper, the Daily Trust newspaper, where security chiefs, the Inspector General of Police, they shunned the rep's invitation, and the House rejected also the representative that were sent to speak on their behalf. So, Joseph, as you speak to this headline, when we see these persons about yet to be screened, they look humble and they would come to be screened in person. They are not screened by proxy. But when it's time to appear before, you begin to see people going on their behalf. Why is this happening, Joseph? Joseph, that's for Joseph. That's for Joseph.
Yes,
okay.
I believe so.
Yeah, that's for Joseph. Okay, he has to come back.
Okay.
So, but why could you respond?
I would say part of it is what Nigerians popularly know as see finish. They don't come because what can the legislature do? Let's just ask the question. And how has the legislature comported itself before now? If they had comported themselves in a certain way, perhaps they'll be more respected. It is inconceivable that the People's House will summon you as an employee of the country and you'll send a proxy to such an august body. I might have my issues with our National Assembly, and I have them on record. But the last thing I would do is disrespect the institution. So the only way you can find that changed is if there are consequences. If there's no consequence, nothing will happen, nothing will change.
All right, so Joseph, this was your paper. You need to respond to this one now.
Okay, sorry, I had a bit of a technical issue. First of all, I think that the National Assembly recognized the importance of respect for their summons, and the last assembly tried to provide an amendment in the law that makes it kind of creates penalties for disobedience of summons. And it was supposed to have, I think it was supposed to attract like 500,000 or something like that. I can't remember. But I don't know what happened to the law, whether it was signed into law at all, whether that amendment was signed at all. If it was done, then it would have been a serious deterrent to the. But the truth is that I think somehow the National Assembly gets a little bit very finicky about this thing, and then they make a whole lot out of it. The truth is simply that these people have a lot they are doing. It may not be practicable in all circumstances that they appear before the National Assembly. Sometimes they do. If the exigencies of their office does not allow them, and they send senior persons, that should be enough to answer the question. What's the purpose? Is to answer the questions. But in this case, I can understand the House of Reps feeling slighted if all of the service chiefs, not one of them, not even
they're
one,
all busy.
They're all busy, too busy, and all that. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. But somehow there should be that working together to know when they are available and also be flexible in some of these things. I've appeared before a National Assembly. I've appeared with State House of Assembly representing my organization at the time, and I remember how we were hardly insulted by the members.
Joe, I remember. Okay,
because our managing director was not there and all that. They called all kinds of them. They called up minions and all this. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so but I just want to piggyback on what AB had said. He talked about sea finish, like disrespects that, but also on the part of these generals. You see, they're generals, they've earned their ranks, and every time they're just an august body of some. Well, they're the people's house, as AB has said. But then every time
they call themselves,
they rush down their generals in that point. I mean, would that also breed respect to also every time they call, just for about little issues where subordinates can come and stand in for them? Does it really all go well?
Well, in my view, if there's proper communication, then surely it shouldn't be every time. There's such a thing called email. There's text, SMS. There's phone calls. So for simple questions, you can ask. But when there's a request that you appear, schedules should be cross-checked and then you should come. I think proper subordination of the military to the civilian administration is important in a democracy.
Completely.
All right. So, Ebi, now this next paper from the Daily Trust, it's yours to help us understand. And because there's been this storm brewing after a certain pronouncement was made about its entry treasury we met. It was a bankrupt state. That was off of the statement. It was more like hearing the sound of that song all over again, made popular, of Shagari saying back in the days that it was empty treasury met, when he came on board. But let's understand this one this time around, where the Labour Party presidential candidate is the one being reported by the Daily Trust saying, disclose the amount inherited from Buhari's government. Peter Obi tells President Tinubu.
I think that's a reasonable request. It's a bit too woolly and smoky to say we inherited an empty treasury. Let's take that at face value. What does that mean? Is it from an empty treasury you can afford a presidential yacht? Is it from an empty treasury you can afford certain billions for cars for a non-constitutionally mandated First Lady's office? Is it from an empty treasury you can afford those vehicles from foreign countries? Is it from an empty treasury you are traveling all over the world? In fact, from Saudi Arabia, I went straight to Guinea the other day, didn't even branch in Nigeria. Is it from an empty? How do you say there's an empty treasury? You tell us at the same time that you have saved X from removing fuel subsidy. What the presidential candidate of the Labour Party is saying is simply speak to specifics. You might be correct, but part of building connection, stakeholding, and trust with the populace is stating specifically what you inherited, and then putting it side by side with your scale of preference. What have you prioritized with either 0 naira, 1 billion naira, 100 billion naira? Because empty is relative. What is empty to Nigeria is certainly exceeding to any individual. So when you say empty treasury to Nigeria, fine. It may be merely that you met a few hundreds of millions of naira. So with those hundreds of millions of naira, what have you chosen to do? I think it's that kind of direct accountability that can make this constant refrain either make sense or be consigned to the rubbish dump of history. Let's get busy governing, not making excuses or making promises. Do it. They say that talk na do what you say.
But again, this wouldn't be the first time that an administration comes on board. The next thing they pass the buck, like, we met a very bad situation. We are only trying to build from scratch. And then what's this tradition of every government leaving decides to make it look bad for the next person? You can't come and start on a very... What's wrong with coming in to meet something soft to build from?
The plague of Nigeria has been leadership. Other countries have snowstorms, they have earthquakes, they have typhoons. Nigeria's natural disaster is leadership. So that is why a set of leaders will enter, will not build a legacy that a new set of people can build upon. That is a historical reference. In this story, sticking to this story, all that is being said, which I feel is a legitimate request, is state what empty means, define it numerically, and then it will be possible for the people to set it side by side with what you have prioritized on that empty treasury as your focus, since you have been there for 5 odd months.
Empty, half full. But let's get to Joseph this morning. Joseph, help us understand what the Nation newspaper is saying about security has improved under Tinubu, and that's the National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, is the one speaking, the man in the eye of the storm. Talk to us about this. You're in Abuja.
Nuhu Ribadu is fast becoming a spokesperson for this government, and in these past few weeks, he seems to be coming up with very interesting comments about how far the government is going, or whether the government is struggling or not. This is a man who comes up to tell us that, oh, they made empty treasury, and then but then we found out that the government practically has been running and spending money for almost 4 or 5 months before they asked for supplementary budget. So on what month, where were they getting the money to run the government until that time? Now he comes out to do an assessment for this government. He is part of this government, and it's actually his portfolio. And he tells us, oh, that we're already doing, with thumping his chest and bragging to all of us how well he's doing. He's not leaving us to do the assessment. Meanwhile, the practical experience on ground for individuals at different levels is that you cannot even risk traveling by road across this country. In a large swath of this country, you can't risk traveling by road because you don't know what you're going to encounter. So I don't know where he's drawing his comparison from. At what point in time has there been any improvement? Is it how many of Boko Haram insurgents they have killed? Is it what that determines his assessment, or what? But what we feel is different. We have got cases of people being kidnapped daily, adoptions in Kaduna, Katsina, and other places. What's going on in the forest of Niger State and so on, in Zamfara, where people are chased out of the farm, where criminal gangs and terrorists are taxing people, and they take their crops and all that. So on what basis? What has changed so dramatically that makes everybody come to the conclusion that security has improved? And this is the problem we've got. You're cocooned in your protection, security, mass of protective whatever, and you're able to, your bubble, security bubble, and you move around in that bubble all over the place. So you conclude that nothing is happening, or everything is okay. But in the reality we feel in this country as individuals, even here in Abuja, where the state government is, people are terrified, people are being kidnapped daily, people are being abducted in all kinds of, they call it one chance and all that. Just the other day, there was a story of a non-correspondent attached to the who was picked up by armed people, and she was robbed right there. They told, in fact, the people, she said, those who took her were secure. One of them was a sacked soldier. The other one is still serving. He's still serving. And they said, okay, we want to prove to you. They say, you say you're covering a security conference. What do they know about security? And so on. It was a direct affront. And this poor woman is traumatized. She's terribly traumatized. And this is happening in Abuja, where Ribadu is, and he's boasting of how very safe Nigeria is. So all it's very shameful for government officials to come out like this and write their own scorecards. It is very, very shameful, and such a thing should be reprimanded by their superiors if actually they really care for this country. Wait for us to assess the government and give you a scorecard, not even after 6 months. But let us see how. But we want to feel that security. We are not feeling it.
Thank you so much. So you don't agree. Now, it says we're broke, but then we may be secured. But then from what Joe has said, we're broke and we're not secured. That's it. So let's go over to AB. AB, two-story building collapses in Lagos, kills an octogenarian. In this case, you are the architect. What really went wrong? Who was asleep and why this would have happened? If you can do this in a minute.
Okay, there was a glitch, but if you're hearing me, first of all, we mourn the loss of the lady who died, unfortunately, when the building collapsed on her. There could be any number of reasons that could lead to a building collapse. It takes detailed analysis to work backwards and understand what led to the final unfortunate event. In that area of Lagos, that Murtala Mohammed Oyinbo side, the terrain is very interesting. You know, it's not far from the water that the Third Mainland Bridge crosses. It's very interesting terrain. And you would think that any structure there would have special geotechnical analysis before it's constructed. It's a two-story building. Maybe it's not really a high rise. Perhaps it's an older, residential building. Whatever the case, to know exactly what happened is important. And then we might have to think of what possible emergency services could be deployed to such a place in anticipation, God forbid, of another one. These kind of incidents should give us an opportunity to assess and reassess our preparedness for disaster. But yes, this poor lady has lost her life, and there's a family in mourning, there are relations, there's damage physical to the building. Now there's going to be more investigation, maybe of structures in the immediate area to see what's distressed and what's not. And I think more information will have to come out for anyone to make a definitive statement about why it collapsed. The only thing we can hold on to now is that this poor lady died, unfortunately, in unfortunate circumstances.
So I'll still stay with you, AB. Help us understand this from the vanguard. Maybe as men don't speak. They say a man must not cry. But at this point, the vanguard is saying domestic violence, 340 husbands beaten by their wives in 1 year. Lagos State government figure from the vanguard. AB.
One thing that you have to give kudos to the Lagos State government is it seems relatively invested in information, collection, analysis, management, and dissemination. Even as you read the headline of the story, there was a slight chuckle in your voice because in general, we know in Africa, at least as men, it is suggested that there is almost no way that a woman can be responsible for domestic violence against a man. I'll go further to say, so kudos to the executive secretary of the Lagos Domestic and Sexual Violence Agency, Mrs. Titilola Vivo Adeniyi, who released a quarter report. This may have been going on for a long time, unmentioned, maybe because of a more open environment. Maybe in today's world, people emote, people speak up. So maybe more men are coming forward. The important thing is that it's treated as a serious matter that it is, and whatever can be done to minimize or completely eliminate it on this side and on the other side should be applied. That's the bottom line. Domestic violence has many, there's the physical, there's also the verbal and emotional. So let's look at it holistically and eliminate it where possible.
Okay, so I have messages coming in from I_Lagos says on the empty treasury, the building from the past administration has started. In my view, that's in a view, and I see nothing wrong with stating the fact that what the status is. I don't see anything wrong with the statement. We are naturally very impatient, and I fear analysts have already pitched their tents with particular candidate or specific region. Let's go back to find Ajayi Olonilua saying the governor is spot right on to add his voice to the call for restructuring. Nigeria on paper is a federation, but it is being administered as a unitary state, hence the urgent need for true federalism. Now, Anthony comes up with this one saying, we are not about record any meaningful growth of development in this country until it is restructured. That's the view of Tony from Marine Beach. And then I've got one from Chima from Ikeja. The Nigerian state is designed to enable tribalism, illegality, corruption, and nepotism. It is benefiting the enablers and their thugs. Currently, this system is used to whip dissenters in line. The geopolitical divide is now used to keep true tribal tongues in power, while the progressive tribes are made to look like outsiders. Next comes in Osage from Ojodu. Everything is still based on impunity. Generals being paid by taxpayers' money cannot answer the call of the National Assembly. And on that National Treasury story, we are not interested in still just Jare. Osage from Ojodu tells us that one. Find Dan Okuda's message says, well, the flamboyant lifestyle of the current government contradicts the bankruptcy claim. That's what Dan Okuda would drop in for us here. But we've got lots of messages. We'll say thank you to everyone who sent in messages, but that's how far we can go this morning. Thank you so much to AB Bozimo for your time.
Thanks for having me. Agree, disagree, talk to me at AB Bozimo on all platforms.
And I would also say thank you to Joseph Obari for your time today.
Thank you very much, Mashi, and everybody else who's listening. AB, thanks, always lively to be here. Thanks so much.
And to everyone who listening, say thank you so much. And to those who were saying what is significant about this day in history, when I said I promise I'll tell you, on this day in history, the head of the Nigerian interim government, Ernest Shonekan, now of blessed memory, resigned his position, and then came in the General Sani Abacha to take over the government of the country. That's the fact about this day in history. My name is Omatseye Atsenuwa. Good morning.
The story.